Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a block print. So to begin, I have a rubber block, I have my design that I've traced onto tracing paper, and a wooden spoon to help the transfer process. So first things first, we need to get our design onto our rubber block, and it needs to be reversed. Tracing paper is great for this because if you trace over a drawing that you already have, when you flip it over, it's going to be reversed already, which is what we want. We can also look through the paper to see where we want to apply pressure with the back of our wooden spoon. When we apply pressure to the areas that have the graphite on them, we're going to transfer some of that graphite onto our block. You want to make sure to focus on areas that have a lot of details. So in this case, probably the most details on her face and the paper boat. So I'm going to spend some extra time getting those details rubbed onto the block. And I'm just going to peel this back, see how it's doing. You can also tape your design down if you're worrying about it moving, but it's not necessary as long as you keep a firm grip on your paper. So you can see like on the side of her face, I missed a lot. So let's pull that back in. Voila. Next thing, I'm going to take a pencil and just go over the areas that I want to make a little bit more clear. I'm going to probably hit up a couple of the lily pads in the side of this paper boat for sure. And that's just because the cleaner your transfer is, the better your carving will be. You know, you can't carve details that you can't see. So this is definitely a part of the process that you don't want to skip or, you know, kind of speed up. Like, make sure you get a good transfer. Getting a good transfer means that you're going to have a better chance at having a good carve. So as I'm looking at this, I'm not really happy with where the slit is on this lily pad. So I'm going to go ahead and change this at this point of the process. I don't want to change too much when I start carving just because things can get confusing. Ideally, I want to have my design as finalized as possible before I start carving. So I'm just going to clean up a couple of these lily pads and the side of her face. Now, I do want to take a moment to discuss tools because as you can see, there's some very small details on her face. Now, I just got a new carving tool with a very detailed edge, or so they claim. This video will also talk about pitfalls that you can run into when carving. And unfortunately, I'm going to give you a spoiler, but this tool is terrible. So because of that, and because it's a new tool, when I do get started in carving, I am going to start carving in an area that's pretty inconsequential. So definitely don't dive right in, you know, to a heavily detailed area with a brand new tool because you don't know how that tool is going to respond. So I'm going to start with the edge of this lily pad and we're just going to see your tool should cut through a rubber block very easily, and this did not do that. I am applying a lot of pressure, and very similarly to like in the kitchen when you should not cut with a dull knife, likewise you should not carve with a dull tool. So they do make tools that can sharpen your edge, but unfortunately I don't have one. So in a minute here, I will be switching to my Old Faithful. So I'm going to go ahead and test a little bit more. I was not sure if this was a me problem or a tool problem, but then I go back to my old tool and I'm like, oh, okay, it's a tool problem. That is unfortunate. So since I've established that the tools that I just bought are not sharp, I'm going to go back to my original tools and make sure that I'm cutting away from myself. That's just for safety. And as you can see, I'm cutting through the block a lot easier with this tool. You should not have to apply a lot of pressure to get a good carve. So now that we've got our tools in place, let's talk about why I'm carving out the inside of the lily pad. When we're done carving, we're going to be using a tool called a brayer to roll ink over the face of this block. So by carving away the inside of this lily pad, I'm creating a space where the brayer cannot lay ink down, and because of that, this area that I'm carving away is going to show up as white on our print. So in the case of this piece specifically, I'm going to be rolling out blue ink, so the water surrounding this lily pad is going to be blue, and the area where the lily pad is carved away is going to be white. So to clear out this area, I'm using a pretty wide U-shaped tool just so I can get the area cleaned out a little bit faster. You always want to double check what tip you're using when carving because there's a bunch of different types. They have some that look like U's, which is great for areas like this, or some that look more like V's, and that's going to give you a deeper carve. Now, you don't have to have a crazy deep carve, but for some areas that you really want to make sure that no residual ink shows up, it can be useful. But I'm not super worried about that in this case because sometimes having a little bit of ink stay can add a really nice texture, and that is one of the things people love about block printing and linocuts. So this is another method that people use in that case. So say you want a really clean carving, like I don't want any ink in this area where the lily pad is. I want it to be pure white. You can go in, fill the area in with a Sharpie, and then when you carve away, you can be sure to get rid of everything. This is a tried and true method for a lot of people. I'm not personally crazy about it, but I do enjoy every now and again using a fine tip Sharpie to do my detail areas because I think it's easier when you have a thicker line. Obviously, like pencil is pretty darn thin. So having a nice thick line is just helpful in some cases. This is also a fantastic method for beginners because it really helps you to visualize what the area you're carving away is going to look like on your finished piece. The area of black on this is going to represent all the ink from your brayer, and we're carving away that ink. We're carving the space away. Now, when we're working around a curve, as you can see too, I'm moving my block with my knife. So this is a really good method to get a nice clean curve, but you just want to make sure as well, always do your best to carve away from yourself. I'm not doing a great job of that right now because I've done this too many times and I've gotten a little complacent, but it does help for a clean curve, but it's also a matter of safety. So always try to carve away from yourself in case your knife slips. So now that I have that edge, I'm going in with that flatter U shape. And as you can see, all these areas that have the ink on it are being carved away. And I'm very sure that they're all going to be gone because there are no residual black marks. So I'm just going to continue carving until all of the black Sharpie is carved away. And again, I'm just going to continue to move my block however I need to get rid of these markings and get the best carve that I can. Definitely does not need to be stationary. So now that we have the basic idea of what we're doing, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up. As you can see, I'm getting rid of these marks that we've made, and we're just seeing the pink of our block. So that's how we know we're getting a pretty good carve. Don't be discouraged if when you have your first print though, you do see a couple of these lines carved away. It just means that the carve wasn't even, but a lot of people really love that look about block printing again. So I definitely wouldn't be discouraged about that. It's just the look of it. And you can always go back into the areas that you don't like and carve away what you need to later. So I'm about to hit the paper boat. And in this area, I kind of just did a time lapse because I was pretty detail focused, but I am going to create a really thick line here. And because I want the inside of the boat to be white, that is what I'm carving away. So in this case, those thick pencil lines I've created are what I'm going to be carving around to create the lines on our finished print. So same thing with her. I did not make the lines as thick for this, but all the areas that I want to be white are what I'm carving away. I don't recommend starting with a face, like anything with any really crazy details. For your first block print, I was definitely sweating with this one, but I have had this idea for a long time and I really needed it to come to fruition. So even though I'm a little nervous about it, I'm excited to see how it goes. Now at this point, I'm going to use a stamp pad so I can get a kind of idea of what the print will look like when it has ink over it. This allows me to see where I need to carve away a little bit more, especially on those details of the face, because I don't want to mess with it too much. Now, on to the printing side. This was a great opportunity for me to use this teeny little bit of ink I had left in this bottle. This is a water-soluble ink, which means it's easily cleaned up with water. I do recommend starting with that if you are new to block printing. Otherwise, you're going to have to use something like a thinner. Now, this is another area of where you may have a pitfall. This is a new brayer that I got. And I can tell already that it's uneven. It's uneven because after a few rolls, as you can see, the ink is pretty splayed out. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? Like I said, this is my first time using it, but I thought it would be good to include so you can see what you might run into, unfortunately. As you can see at the bottom of this brayer, I'm not even getting ink on most of it. So unfortunately, this is a wash. The roller is completely uneven and that is not going to make for a good print. So sadly, if I can't figure out a way to get a new roller for this specific one, it is not something that I'm going to be able to use. So at this point in the video, I am going to go get my old brayer again. I really recommend Speedball brand. I've honestly never had any issues with them. So here we go. Let's roll out this same patch of ink. As you can see now, I'm getting a nice thin layer of ink. That's what it should look like. If you're getting those really uneven lines, unfortunately, you've been sold a bad brayer. Now, as we go to lay our ink on top of the block, for this first one, this is mainly just to see how it's going to look. I'm going to go ahead and just roll out gently so I can see if there's any other details that I want to carve away. This actually is not going to be something that we print with. This is just for a test. And I am actually very pleased, but as you can see, there's like that little area where her hair is that for me personally, I think it's a little bit too thick. So now I can go in and very gently carve away what I want to and see what it will truly look like on the paper. And then I'll just wash away this ink with water. Like I said, it's water soluble, which is great. And I can kind of tweak the design however I want at this stage. So I'm going to add a couple more water ripples, kind of even out the design. And then I can go into these areas where I was hoping for just a clean white area, and I can carve away the excess that I need to. So I'm just getting rid of this because I don't really want like a vertical line on my lily pad. So just a little bit more detail work on this, and I think we will be ready to print. So hopefully this kind of shows you too, like why the Sharpie method works so well for some people. But personally, like I think that this is a quicker and easier method for me, and I like that I can just rinse the ink off the block when I'm done. It is easy to get a little carried away at this stage, so at this point I'm getting ready to cut myself off. Now let's talk about paper. So I'm going to be printing on 5x7 paper, but the block that I'm working with is 4x6. So I'm going to take a sacrifice sheet of paper and I'm going to lay another 4x6 block in the center until I get even edges all the way around. But If you're not comfortable with eyeballing, which a lot of people are not, you can always just grab a ruler out like this and you can mark for your even edges, and then we're just going to draw it out. This is going to show us where we need to put our block to get even borders when we're printing. So now I'm ready to get out the ink that I actually am going to use for printing. This is also new ink, so talk about, pitfalls. Here we go. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to take my brayer. I can tell already that this is a very thick ink. It's a lot thicker than I'm used to working with, but I don't hate it because I feel like that means I'm going to be able to use it a lot quicker. Like when you have thin layers of ink, they dry out. This does not seem like an ink that's going to dry out very quickly. It's called Leoball brand, and I'm going to use these upward strokes to apply the ink to my block. I can see that it's still pretty light in some of these areas, so the first thing I want to do is just get this ink down. I never really use the first print like for sale or anything. Like it's mainly just to get a base layer of ink on the block, so I'm not super worried about it. A lot of people use like a throwaway piece of paper for this first print, and it's just a sacrifice. There are sacrifices made in art, unfortunately, but I mean, obviously we don't want to do that if we don't have to, but it's just kind of the reality of things sometimes. So here I have my inked block in my guidelines. I'm gonna just center that the best I can, and it looks like I've got a decent layer of ink here, so I'm going to get ready to print. I'm going to very carefully line up the edges of my print piece of paper with my sacrifice piece of paper, and I'm just going to gently place the edges of my hands on this to get things really secured, like that little bit of stick. It really helps when you go in with your spoon, or they have some other tools that you can use, but for this first print, I'm going to go ahead and use a wooden spoon. This is tried and true for a lot of people. You want to just make sure you're getting even pressure, holding your print, and ideally we want to get over the entire surface. You don't have to use a wooden spoon. You can use the edge of your hand. That is also perfectly acceptable. It's really all about what works best for you. Honestly, like the side of the hand for me is honestly kind of my go-to. And honestly, not bad for a first print with new ink. I'm pretty happy with that. There's only really a couple areas that I'm not super a fan of the look of. So now that I've seen what the print looks like, I'm just going to go ahead and carve away what I don't like. I just want to get rid of this teeny little bit here on this lily pad. So I'm just going to go back in with my U-shaped blade and carve that away. And then I'll be ready for the next print. So I'm going to remove the block from that guideline paper and just add a little bit more ink. I'm going to try to get this as thin of a layer as possible. And if you can kind of tell, the ink is starting to look a little bit tacky on that glass. That is what we're looking for. It should be just like a little bit sticky feeling, and it'll make kind of like a tacky sound, and that's how you know it'll be ready for printing. So when you're applying the ink, we kind of want to apply the brayer in the same direction. That's going to lay down the ink without picking any back up. If we roll back and forth, we're actually going to be picking up a little bit of ink when we go backwards. We want to avoid that. So ideally you want to try to like roll in the same direction while also getting an even layer. So you might have to play around with it a little bit, but just try to remember, ideally you want to roll in the same direction to lay the ink down instead of picking the ink back up. So I'm going to go ahead and get this back in our guidelines. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to go get our next piece of paper. Now again, we'll very carefully line up our corners so that we get an even print. I like to use the sides of my hands to make sure that it's kind of stuck and then go in with my spoon. You also want to make sure when you're going over areas, like make sure the areas that have a lot of detail, you want to try to get a nice even pressure because some of the detail work, it can get a little bit flooded if you have too much ink on your block. Really the key in all of this is figuring out how much ink is going to look the best for your design, and that will vary block by block. Each design is going to have different needs. You just have to learn those needs and execute them as necessary. So here's attempt number 2. Very happy with that. So I'm just going to continue to print. Now there is another tool that I am not showing because I don't always use it, but it can be very helpful for people if you have like wrist problems. It's called a bar-en, and instead of like using the back of the wooden spoon, it's essentially like a flat apparatus that allows you to get even pressure. That can be really useful, but it's simply not necessary. So, especially if you're just starting out and you're not sure if you'll like print making, I would recommend to just, start out without it and then see, because they can get kind of expensive. So it can be an investment for printmaking. Unfortunately, going for tools that are inexpensive generally doesn't work out the best. You want to make sure you have like good tools so you can get good prints. That kit that I was working with earlier had those tips from the beginning and the uneven brayer, and I wasted, say $20, but $20, I mean, it's a bummer. So just make sure that you're getting the right tools for the job. But as I'm finishing up, I just want to say thank you again so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. I really appreciate your support, and I really hope that this helps you get into the art of block printing. It's really fun. I hope you give it a try. Thanks so much, and again, thanks for watching.